8. Friday, June 20th. Daniel 11:36. Daniel 12:13 Supplementary reading. War and Peace in the Middle East. The Middle East in Bible Prophecy, pages 25 to 32. Jerusalem remains the most contested city on earth, having fallen to invading forces more than 20 times throughout its recorded history. The land to which God sent Abraham some 4,000 years ago lies at the very crossroads of 3 continents. It is also holy to 3 religions. More than 2,500 years ago, God revealed to the prophet Daniel that the land of his people would be fought over throughout the centuries, as described in chapter 3 of this booklet. Interestingly, we see a long time gap in Daniel's prophecy that accurately foretold what would happen in the centuries ahead. To understand this, we need to turn again to Daniel 11. As earlier explained, the first 35 verses of Daniel 11 are an accurate, detailed account of what would befall the people of Judah caught up in a conflict between the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt to the south and the Seleucids of Syria to the north. The rulers of these kingdoms were descended from generals of Alexander the Great, who also was foretold in the book of Daniel. In an interesting historical footnote, the 1st century Jewish historian Josephus recounts a meeting between Alexander and the Jewish high priest in Jerusalem, who pointed out that Alexander's coming had been prophesied by Daniel more than 2 centuries before he emerged on the scene. See Antiquities of the Jews, Book 11, Chap. 8, Sec. 5. The 4 verses that follow in Daniel 11:36 to 39 appear to jump forward in time. As explained earlier, Daniel 11:32 to 35 appear to concern the faithful Maccabees, who would not abandon God's laws for pagan Greek ways. Yet these same verses appear to be dual, as the group referred to in Daniel 11:35 continues to the time of the end, meaning that God's faithful people in New Testament times, his church, are included. Daniel 11:36 continues the storyline. But at what point? Since Daniel 11:40 clearly advances the story to the time of the end, it may be that verses 36 to 39 apply to the whole history of the kingdom of the north from the time of the Maccabees and the beginnings of the New Testament church continuing up to the time of the end, just as verse 35 appears to extend from ancient times all the way to the end time. And who was the king of the north during this period? In 65 BC, Seleucid Syria was swallowed up by the Roman Empire. Thus that empire then became the kingdom of the north. Verses 36 to 38 appear to describe the actions of the Roman emperors and their successors, leading all the way up to the final leader of the end time, as we will see. While the duality of the prophecy serves to advance the time frame, Antiochus Epiphanes himself being a type of this end-time ruler, we might wonder why there are such major jumps to the future. State of Israel had to be established to fulfill prophecy. Why the time gap in Daniel's prophecy between the ancient world and the world of today, a period of at least 2,000 years, with only sparse and cursory details of events in between? The answer is simple. For almost 2,000 years, there was no Jewish nation in the Middle East. The restoration of the Jewish state in 1948 has made the kings of the North and South relevant again to impacting the Jewish people in the Holy Land. End-time prophecy could not be fulfilled without the restoration of the Jews to their homeland. Although their nation is called Israel, remember that the 10 tribes of the ancient northern kingdom known as Israel were taken into captivity by Assyria more than a century before the kingdom of Judah, comprising the Israelite tribes of Judah and Benjamin with a considerable portion of Levi, was invaded, and its people taken to Babylon. Many of the Jews returned from their captivity, but the 10 tribes seemingly disappeared. The Bible shows that in time all the tribes of Israel will return to the Promised Land, but at this point only the tribe of Judah, or at least a portion of it, has been restored to its historic home. In the Old Testament prophetic book of Zechariah we read that Jerusalem and Judah, Jews constituting the modern state of Israel, are at the center of world conflict immediately before Christ's return. But this prophesied event could not have taken place without the physical restoration of Judah, now named Israel, to some extent in the Holy Land before the end of the age. In Zechariah 14:3-5, we see this prophecy about Christ's second coming. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations, as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in 2, from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. Then you shall flee through my mountain valley. Clearly, this prophecy is still for the future. The preceding verses show that the reason the people need to flee is because Jerusalem will once again be a scene of great turmoil. For, I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem, the city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Zechariah 14:2. Previously Zechariah had recorded these words from God. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of drunkenness to all the surrounding peoples, when they lay siege against Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall happen in that day that I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who would heave it away will surely be cut in pieces, though all nations of the earth are gathered against it. Zechariah 12:2-3. Judah. The Israelis, most of whom are Jews, and Jerusalem are destined to be at the very center of end-time events. The nations that come against her will be so ideologically and emotionally driven, they will not be able to think straight. The drunkenness Zechariah refers to. Already, some nations and peoples are obsessed with destroying the Jewish homeland of Israel. Another prophet tells of the fall of end-time Israel, descendants of the northern lost 10 tribes, and Judah the Jews together, apparently in the same month, an event that never happened in ancient history. We read of this in Hosea 5. Condemning Israel and Judah for their repeated idolatry, God says, "The pride of Israel testifies to his face, therefore Israel and Ephraim stumble in their iniquity sin. Judah also stumbles with them. They have dealt treacherously with the Lord. Now a new moon shall devour them and their heritage." Hosea 5:5-7. A new moon devouring them would seem to mean that they both will fall within a month, a 30-day period. To understand where the other 10 tribes of Israel are today, request or download our free booklet, The United States and Britain in Bible Prophecy. The struggle continues. We can now understand more clearly why the struggle between the kings of the north and south resumes again at the time of the end, Daniel 11:40. The verse continues to describe how the king of the south shall attack him, the king of the north, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships, all symbols of military action. And he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. Clearly, at the time of the end, another round of great turmoil will engulf the Middle East. Only this time, it will be far worse than anything ever seen before. And again, the fulfillment of this prophecy would not have been possible until after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and the division of those Arab territories that were a part of it into the various nations of the Middle East today. From chapter 3 of this booklet, we saw that the expression king of the north applied anciently to the Seleucid dynasty of Syria, while the king of the south referred to the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. But who might these terms refer to in our time or the time of the end? It's doubtful that they could once again apply to Syria and Egypt, as they are now brother Arab and Islamic nations. Also, while relatively strong by regional standards, neither currently has the military might to fulfill this prophecy. As already noted, Rome swallowed up Syria and became the kingdom of the north thereafter. But did not Rome fall in ancient times? Part of the key to understanding this passage is to realize that the center of the prophecy is the Holy Land and Jerusalem, the historic land given to the children of Israel. The kings referred to are powerful leaders who will come from regions to the north and south and vie for control of the area, trampling all over Judah in the process. A century ago, no one could have understood many of the prophecies relating to this part of the world, because the Ottoman Empire ruled over the places now occupied by the chief adversaries in the Mideast conflict. This fact helps us understand God's words to Daniel at the end of his prophetic book, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end," Daniel 12:9. It would have been impossible for Daniel, living in the 6th century BC, to have understood the astounding changes that would lead up to today's complex Middle East situation. Just as the modern states of Israel, Egypt, Iraq, and Syria did not exist a century ago, so at this time the final kings of the north and south have not emerged yet. But the Bible does help us understand what to expect. We read in the prophetic books of Daniel and Revelation that another global superpower will arise at the end of this age. We find further details of this end-time power in Revelation 17. Just as Daniel saw various beasts that represented the dominant powers to come, so the Apostle John saw a vision of another beast that would dominate the world at the very time of the end. Revelation 17:3. The 10 horns referred to here, as an angel explained to John, represent 10 rulers who receive power for 1 hour, symbolic of a short time, with a single ruler who is also called the beast. Revelation 17:12-13. Notice the time setting of these events. These will make war with the Lamb, the returning Jesus Christ, and the Lamb will overcome them. Revelation 17:14. This prophecy then is for the future, and leads right into the return of Jesus Christ to earth. But these are not the only significant end-time players. A religious leader symbolized as having two horns like a lamb but who speaks like a dragon, Revelation 13:11, will play a prominent role in this end-time union of nations. Jesus Christ is the true Lamb of God. John 1:29-36, Revelation 5:8-9, Revelation 19:7-9. So this religious leader apparently will claim to be Christian. But he is really of Satan, the dragon who deceives the whole world, Revelation 12:9. The beast referred to in Revelation 17 is a continuation of the four beasts of Daniel 7. As we saw earlier, Daniel, while in captivity in Babylon, recorded a vision of four great beasts, Daniel 7:3, Gentile empires that would dominate the Middle East and have a major impact on the people of God. The empires were, in chronological order, the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great, and the Roman Empire. Attempts to revive the Roman Empire are to succeed dramatically at the time of the end. At that time, a successor empire is prophesied to restore the European unity that Rome first achieved more than 2,000 years ago. This empire is to lead right into Christ's return and the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. Daniel 7:9-14. Since the fourth beast described in Daniel 7 exists at the time of Jesus Christ's return, and the same is true of the beast John saw in Revelation 17, both prophecies speak of an end-time resurrection of the Roman Empire. This is the other key to understanding the prophecy. The kingdoms of North and South concerned successive powers. Rome took over Assyria, and Rome did indeed fall. But the Roman Empire has been revived in numerous forms over the centuries, and one final revival remains. This final resurrection of the Roman Empire, like the original empire, will be centered in Europe. It appears that it can be seen today in its embryonic form in the European Union. That is not to say that all current EU nations will be part of the final configuration, but those that choose to participate will combine to form a powerful military force that will involve itself in the Middle East. This end-time king of the north spoken of in Daniel 11 then appears to be the final ruler of this end-time European-centered superpower, the same one called the beast in Revelation 17, the final king of the south. What about the king of the south? To understand who that might be, we must first have some understanding of the history and thinking of the people in this region. In Islamic thinking, the world is divided into two spheres, Dar al-Islam, meaning the land of Islam, and Dar al-Harb, meaning the land of the unbeliever or the land of struggle. The Quran teaches that Allah sent for his apostle Muhammad with guidance and the true faith, so that he may exalt it above all religions, much as the idolaters may dislike it. Surah 61:9 Dawood translation. A fundamental aspect of Islamic teaching is that Islam must eventually become the dominant religion of the entire world. Remember also that the dream of the Arab peoples is for Arab unity. The warring tribes of Arabia were first united by Muhammad through a new religion, Islam. The Ummah, the community of Islam, has been a constant dream through the centuries. For 750 years now the sons of Ishmael have not been united. Only in the last 50 years have they even been independent of foreign control. The dream is still there, unfulfilled. For a time, after the 1952 revolution in Egypt, President Nasser was the inspiration for Arab unity, and many thought he would bring it about. More recently, Iraq's Saddam Hussein thought the same way, desiring to unite the Arab world against the United States and Israel. Going back further in time, Sudan's Muhammad Ahmed ibn al-Sayed, 1844 to 1885, proclaimed himself the Islamic Messiah, the Mahdi, divinely guided one, who would unite Muslims and defeat the infidels. He failed in his mission, but he had greater success at uniting Arabs than the secular leaders have had. We should also note that many Muslims believe that another Mahdi is prophesied to appear in a tumultuous time to restore the Islamic faith and ensure its final victory over all other religions. In more recent times, Osama bin Laden became the spiritual successor of the Sudanese Mahdi and found considerable success in uniting Muslims against the West. Wherever you go in the Islamic world, bin Laden is the people's hero, giving them hope of a final triumph. As Muhammad's followers brought about the defeat of the two great superpowers of his day, Byzantium and Persia, so Osama bin Laden and his followers have desired to bring down the two superpowers of our era. 1. The Soviet Union, dissolved in 1991. Its collapse due in large part to the Afghan rebels, led by bin Laden, who defeated the Soviets in Afghanistan. Sept. 11 showed how vulnerable the second superpower, the United States, is to terrorism. Repeated warnings from Washington have made it clear that the country remains susceptible to terrorist attacks, potentially even more devastating than the first. This end-time king of the South will rise up to defy the West, striking out against the king of the North. Whoever the end-time king of the South might be, whether a popular figure similar to Osama bin Laden, a political leader, as were Gamal Abdel Nasser and Saddam Hussein, or a religious figure such as the Ayatollah Khomeini or the prophesied Mahdi to come, someone will engage in this final conflict against the West, possibly in yet another attempt to bring about long-sought Arab and Islamic unity. He will unwittingly set in motion a cascade of events that will lead to unimaginable carnage before Jesus Christ intervenes to put a stop to it. The climactic Mideast war unfolds. Returning to Daniel 11:40, we see that the forces of these two end-time leaders, the kings of the north and south, will clash. At the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. King James Version. The word push is translated from the Hebrew word nagach, which can mean either to push or to attack. It is used of a bull or ram attacking with its horns. Figuratively, this means to war against. The form this push or attack may take isn't spelled out. What is evident, however, is that this end-time leader from the south will attack the north in such a way as to warrant a major military invasion of the Middle East. Considering the ways Islamic extremists have attacked the Western powers in recent years, something like a series of major terror attacks against European targets could be the push referred to here. From this point on, the king of the south is no longer specifically mentioned in Scripture. What happens to him isn't spelled out. The same chapter shows that the king of the north, the European-centered beast power, will be the victor, as he invades the Holy Land and overthrows many countries. Daniel 11:41. Among them are Egypt and the Libyans and Ethiopians. Understand that these biblical names for peoples and places may not be precisely identical with today's national borders, although the regions are certainly the same, first and second woes. However, news from the east and the north shall trouble him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. Daniel 11:44. These actions by the end-time king of the north appear to be connected with the fifth trumpet or first woe of Revelation 9:1-11, as both the forces bringing the first woe and the end-time beast power are described as ascending out of the bottomless pit. Verses 1-2, Revelation 11:7, Revelation 17:8. For more details, request or download our free booklet, The Book of Revelation Unveiled. At the time the Book of Revelation was written, the eastern border of the Roman Empire was the Euphrates River, which begins in Turkey and bisects Syria and Iraq before emptying into the Persian Gulf. The countries referred to in the last few verses of Daniel 11 are all far to the west of this river. Yet in the end-time events prophesied in the Book of Revelation, this river is a significant geographic marker. Notice Revelation 9:13-16. Then the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the four angels, who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year, were released to kill a third of mankind. Now the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them. Here we have the sixth trumpet and second woe, identified as a massive 200 million man army released to kill a third of mankind. Clearly we are talking about major clashes between the Western world, in the form of the forces of the King of the North, and a massive army from regions along or beyond the Euphrates River, threatened by a major foreign military presence that has invaded North Africa and modern-day Israel. This military force combines to fight against it. What nations come together to form these vast armies? Two possibilities seem likely in today's geopolitical climate, or a combination of the two. The presence of non-Islamic forces, infidels on Islamic ground, has been a source of contention in the region since the time of the Crusades almost 1,000 years ago. The presence in the Middle East of forces of the revived Roman Empire, the prophesied beast power, a spiritual successor to the Crusaders, will no doubt inflame Islamic feelings once again. It is possible, therefore, that this massive army is a multinational Islamic force, formed from some or all of the Islamic countries along or to the north and east of the Euphrates. This would include nations like Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and even participants from India, with the second largest Muslim population in the world, after Indonesia, though most of its citizens are Hindus. Further to the north and east of the Holy Land are the relatively new Islamic nations that came into existence after the fall of the Soviet Union: Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. The world's Muslim population totals some 1.3 billion, most of whom are in this general geographic area. Another possibility for these forces includes Russia and China, two major world powers that often share common interests, along with their allies and other nations from the Far East. A threat to the Persian Gulf oil supplies, real or imagined, could provoke action by these nations. China, with its population of 1.3 billion, could certainly field a massive military force. And Russia's weapons technology still makes it a formidable military power. Additionally, it is possible that all these forces will come together briefly, fearful of the increased military might and presence of the King of the North. Indeed, important defense and economic ties already exist between Russia and China, and some Muslim nations of Central Asia and the Middle East, setting the stage for Armageddon. Later, as part of the chain of events that followed the sounding of the seventh trumpet in Revelation 11:15, we find the Euphrates River mentioned again. Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared. Revelation 16:12. Who these leaders and forces are isn't explicitly spelled out either. We know only that they come from east of the Euphrates. Like the earlier 200 million man army, it appears this force is primarily from either the Muslim world, or from China and/or Russia and their allies. Or again, it could be a combination of some or all of these nations. In fact, it could well be the same general power block as that in Revelation 9, though. This being a different episode, it doesn't have to be. Contributing to this conflict, demons, performing signs, go out to the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. And they gather them together to the place called in Hebrew, Armageddon. Revelation 16:14-16. In the end, it doesn't seem to matter specifically which countries are involved in this growing world war, at which point in time, for, ultimately Revelation 16:14 tells us that the kings of the whole world will be gathered to the Middle East for a final battle. So it seems likely that all of the aforementioned Eastern powers will be engaged at some point. Indeed, however it plays out, virtually all remaining military forces apparently will be drawn into this final maelstrom of destruction to some degree, just as happened in the two great world wars of the 20th century. Yet ironically, this is all part of God's plan, and absolutely necessary for peace to finally be established in this war-torn region. Christ's intervention to save mankind. All this maneuvering, destruction and devastation, which takes the lives of at least a third of the human race, Revelation 9:15-18, is the prelude to Jesus Christ's second coming. He has to return to save mankind from this final cataclysmic conflict that otherwise would leave no human survivors. As he said of the time immediately preceding his return to earth, unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. Matthew 2:4-22. But at his return, the peoples of the world will not automatically accept him. As we saw earlier, the 10 kings allied with the beast will fight against him. Revelation 17:14. Revelation 16:16 tells us that armies will be gathered to the place called in Hebrew, Armageddon. Armageddon is the Greek form of the Hebrew name, Har Megiddon, meaning hill or mountain of Megiddo, an ancient town about 55 miles north of Jerusalem and 15 miles inland from the Mediterranean Sea. It overlooks the valley of Jezreel, or Esdraelon, a large open plain. Yet the final battle will not be here. Instead, it appears that this will be the final staging area for the armies that will fight against Jesus Christ. The battle itself will take place in the valley of Jehoshaphat near Jerusalem, as prophesied in Joel 3:4. Behold, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations, and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Assemble and come, all you nations, for there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Joel 3:1-2, Joel 3:11-12. Jehoshaphat even means judgment of the eternal. Revelation 19:11-16 describes what happens next. Now I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. This is a description of the returning Jesus Christ, who will now execute God's judgment on a rebellious, sin-filled world, and on those who resist him by force. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations. And he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Several verses describe what will happen to the assembled forces that fight Jesus at his return. Revelation 19:17-21, Zechariah 14:12. But like all human resistance to God's plan and purpose, it will prove futile. Peace at last. After so much death and destruction, and centuries of war and unrest in the Middle East, imagine what a difference the second coming of Jesus Christ will make. Jews, Christians, and Muslims not only have a common spiritual ancestor in Abraham, adherents of all three religions expect, in different ways, a Messiah. Only after the true Messiah comes, can all three begin to live in true harmony, devoid of religious differences and finally understanding and appreciating the blood ties between them. They will be able to work together under the returned Jesus Christ to resolve their differences. Haggai 2:6-7 prophesies of this time once more. I will shake heaven and earth, the sea and dry land, and I will shake all nations, and they shall come to the desire of all nations. The desire of all nations is the promised Messiah, the hope of all three faiths. Described as the Prince of Peace in Isaiah 9:6, Jesus Christ will establish his government on earth with Jerusalem as its capital. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain, prophetic symbol of a government of the Lord's house, shall be established on the top of the mountains over all other governments of the world, and people shall flow to it. Many nations shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Micah 4:1-2. All the children of Abraham, Arab, Jew, and Israelite alike, along with all the inhabitants of the entire earth, will then have the opportunity to learn God's truth and receive his gift of salvation. No longer will they be at war, but they will be allies, cooperating together in a spirit of peace and brotherhood, all acknowledging the true God and living according to his ways, all receiving his blessings. Isaiah 19:20-25. To better understand this time and how it will finally come about, request or download our free booklet, The Gospel of the Kingdom. Satan, the devil, the instigator of so much war and suffering, and the unseen influence behind the scenes, will be locked away so he can no longer deceive and oppress the nations. Revelation 12:9, Revelation 21-3. To discover more about this evil being and his influence, request or download our free booklet, Is There Really a Devil? Under Christ's righteous rule, peace, not war, will break out in this long troubled land. He shall judge between many peoples, and rebuke strong nations afar off. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. But everyone shall sit under his vine and under his fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken. Micah 4:3-4. Terror-ravaged Jerusalem will be fearful no longer. God decrees, I will return to Zion, and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. Old men and old women shall again sit in the streets of Jerusalem, each one with his staff in his hand because of great age. The streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls, playing. Zechariah 8:3-5. Zechariah 14:8-9 adds to the beautiful picture of the wonderful glorious future ahead. And in that day it shall be that living water shall flow from Jerusalem, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. Finally, beyond the darkness and gloom, after thousands of years of war and travail, at long last mankind will see peace in Jerusalem and throughout the land that God gave to Abraham 4,000 years ago. A peace that will extend across the entire Middle East and ultimately fill the whole world. What is the abomination of desolation? The Middle East in Bible Prophecy, pages 26-27. What is the abomination of desolation mentioned in the Bible within the book of Daniel? In his most detailed prophecy of the end time, Jesus said, When you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel, the prophet standing in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Matthew 24:15-16. What was he talking about? The longest and most precise prophecy of the Bible, Daniel 11, recorded in advance what would occur in the empires and nations that would vie for control of the Holy Land for centuries to come. It describes in astounding detail rulers and other peoples who lived long after Daniel's prophecy and several centuries before Christ, as spelled out in chapter 3 of this booklet. For much of the prophecy, these kingdoms were Syria to the north, ruled by descendants of Seleucus, one of the generals of Alexander the Great, and Egypt to the south, ruled by descendants of another of Alexander's generals, Ptolemy. An evil ruler arises. Eventually the prophecy describes a Seleucid ruler named Antiochus IV, also known as Antiochus Epiphanes. Daniel 11:21 states, "And in his Seleucus' fourth place shall arise a vile person, to whom they will not give the honor of royalty." Most Syrian officials, tired of the excesses of the Seleucid rulers, backed the usurper Heliodorus, who had poisoned the previous king. But the prophecy explains of Antiochus, "He shall come in peaceably, and seize the kingdom by intrigue," verse 21. By a show of what some historians have called Roman manners, and a great deal of flattery, he enlisted the aid of neighboring King Eumenes II of Pergamum and officials at home in forcing out Heliodorus and obtaining the throne in 175 BC. The next verse explains that all those who opposed Antiochus would be swept away and broken, and they were. At this time, Syria ruled over the Holy Land. Included in those swept away is one referred to as the Prince of the Covenant, Daniel 11:22. This is apparently a reference to a Hellenistic Jew who changed his name to the Greek form Jason, appointed by Antiochus as replacement high priest over the Jewish worship system. He was dropped from that position by Antiochus only 3 years later in favor of another Hellenizing, that is, Greek culture-promoting apostate named Menelaus. As Daniel 11:23-24 show, elements of the Jewish leadership made a league, a treaty or similar agreement, with Antiochus, and at first he entered peaceably into the Holy Land with only a small force. What did this league, or covenant, entail? The apocryphal book of 1 Maccabees, although not scripture, provides us with history of the period. "In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us." 1 Maccabees 1:11, KJV. Continuing in a paraphrased version of the account, "For our refusal to associate with them has brought us nothing but trouble." This proposal appealed to many people, and some of them became so enthusiastic about it that they went to the king and received from him permission to follow Gentile customs. They built in Jerusalem a stadium like those in the Greek cities. They had surgery performed to hide their circumcision, abandoned the Holy Covenant, started associating with Gentiles, and did all sorts of other evil things. 1 Maccabees 1:11-15, today's English version. Still, even the apostatizing factions did not wholly abandon the Jewish worship system, at least not yet. In any event, Antiochus soon betrayed the Jewish leaders by taking from the rich and giving to the poor, yet only as a temporary ploy to gain support among the Jewish masses. Daniel 11:24. Antiochus vents his fury. Then notice what was to happen in 168 BC. After the king defeated Egypt, while returning to his land with great riches, his heart shall be moved against the Holy Covenant, so he shall do damage and return to his own land. Daniel 11:28. As 1 Maccabees records, he set himself against the Jews, massacred many of them, and plundered the temple at Jerusalem before returning to Syria. 1 Maccabees 1:20-28. Antiochus then embarked on a second venture into Egypt, unsuccessful this time because a Roman fleet forced him to give up his fight and return the island of Cyprus to Egypt. Daniel 11:30. Therefore he shall be grieved, and return in rage against the Holy Covenant, and do damage. So he shall return, and show regard for those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Verse 30. Antiochus vented his fury on the Jews, yet he accorded special favor to those among them who rejected their religion. As 1 Maccabees explains, when the soldiers entered Jerusalem, their commander spoke to the people, offering them terms of peace and completely deceiving them. Then he suddenly launched a fierce attack on the city, dealing it a major blow, and killing many of the people. He plundered the city, set it on fire, and tore down its buildings and walls. He and his army took the women and children as prisoners and seized the cattle. Then Antiochus and his forces built high walls and strong towers in the area north of the temple, turning it into a fort. 1 Maccabees 1:29-33 Tev. 1 Maccabees gives us details. Antiochus now issued a decree that all nations in his empire should abandon their own customs and become one people. All the Gentiles and even many of the Israelites submitted to this decree. They adopted the official pagan religion, offered sacrifices to idols, and no longer observed the Sabbath. The king also sent messengers with a decree to Jerusalem and all the towns of Judea, ordering the people to follow customs that were foreign to the country. He ordered them not to offer burnt offerings, grain offerings, or wine offerings in the temple, and commanded them to treat Sabbaths and festivals as ordinary workdays. They were even ordered to defile the temple and the holy things in it. They were commanded to build pagan altars, temples, and shrines, and to sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals there. They were forbidden to circumcise their sons, and were required to make themselves unclean in every way they could, so that they would forget the law which the Lord had given through Moses, and would disobey all its commands. The penalty for disobeying the king's decree was death. The king not only issued the same decree throughout his whole empire, but he also appointed officials to supervise the people, and commanded each town in Judea to offer pagan sacrifices. Many of the Jews were ready to forsake the law and to obey these officials. They defiled the land with their evil, and their conduct forced all true Israelites to hide wherever they could. 1 Maccabees 1:41-53 Tev. The temple defiled. Then it happened, on the 15th day of the month Kislev in the year 145. 1 Maccabees 1:54 Tev, which corresponds to 16:8-16:7 BC. They set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar of the temple. Verse 54, KJV. This appears to have been a pagan altar, probably with an image representing the Greek chief god Zeus, as 2 Maccabees 6:2 tells us that Antiochus defiled the Jewish temple by dedicating it to the Olympian god Zeus Tev. After all, to the Greek mind the god of the Hebrews simply equated to the chief god in the Greeks' pantheon. We are further told, pagan sacrifices were offered in front of houses and in the streets. Any books of the law which were found were torn up and burned. And anyone who was caught with a copy of the sacred books or who obeyed the law was put to death by order of the king. Month after month these wicked people used their power against the Israelites caught in the towns. On the 25th of the month, these same evil people offered sacrifices on the pagan altar, erected on top of the altar in the temple. 1 Maccabees 1:55-59 Tev. Indeed, pigs, declared unclean in God's law, Deuteronomy 14:8, were offered over his own altar. The account in 1 Maccabees 1:60 continues. Mothers who had allowed their babies to be circumcised were put to death in accordance with the king's decree. Their babies were hung around their necks, and their families and those who had circumcised them were put to death. Tev. Yet, as horrible as this was, some still resisted. In fact, 1 Maccabees 1:62-63 reports, "But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their hearts not to eat unclean food. They chose to die rather than to be defiled by food or to profane the Holy Covenant, and they did die." Very great wrath came upon Israel, New Revised Standard Version. Yet many in the resistance lived. The account continues with the rise of the Hasmonean priestly family of Mattathias, including his son and successor Judas Maccabeus, who would not compromise with paganism. In the end, the efforts of these patriots and their followers were in large measure responsible for eventually pushing the Syrians out. Later prophetic fulfillment. Now, with all of that as history, consider Christ's warning about the abomination of desolation. When he gave it, hadn't this part of Daniel's prophecy been fulfilled almost 200 years earlier, as we've seen? Certainly. So Daniel's prophecy, according to Jesus, must have a dual fulfillment. Jesus revealed to us the time for this prophecy's ultimate fulfillment in Matthew 24 when he explained what would immediately follow it. "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved alive, but for the elect's sake those days will be shortened." Matthew 24:21-22. This recalls another part of Daniel's prophecy, which says that in the end time there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Daniel 12:1-2. So this awful period of tribulation occurs at the end of this present age. just before Christ's return when he will resurrect his faithful followers, 1 Thessalonians 4:15-16. Indeed, Daniel was told that from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, 12 and 90 days. A little more than 2 years would elapse until apparently the resurrection of Daniel and the rest of the saints would occur. Daniel 12:11-13, Lessons from the First Fulfillment. We can learn a great deal about this end-time prophecy from the original abomination of desolation Daniel foretold. Antiochus Epiphanes was a forerunner of the end-time king of the north, the world dictator the book of Revelation refers to as the beast. No doubt this end-time ruler will employ the same deceitful and underhanded methods that marked the reign of Antiochus and many of his successors, such as Hitler. Furthermore, it appears from what we've seen and other scriptural indications that the end-time ruler, to accomplish his ends, will feign overtures of peace to the Jews of the modern nation of Israel. This might help explain why the end-time king of the south, evidently an Islamic leader, will act against the final beast power, Daniel 11:40. What other parallels do we see? Part of the abomination of Antiochus involved the cessation of the daily temple sacrifices, Daniel 11:31. Yet Daniel's prophecy makes it clear that sacrifices will again be ended in conjunction with the abomination of desolation to come, Daniel 12:9-13. For this prophecy to be fulfilled, it appears that sacrifices will again be instituted, and an altar rebuilt before the return of Jesus the Messiah. In another parallel, Antiochus defiled the ancient holy temple when he erected an idol of the pagan god Zeus and sacrificed swine there. The end-time abomination may also involve an idolatrous image at a new temple. What we know for certain is that within the temple of God there will be an actual person who claims to be God in the flesh. The Apostle Paul, in 2 Thessalonians 2:1-12, foretold this son of perdition. Notice verses 3-4, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day of Christ's return will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Christ will destroy this religious figure at his second coming, verses 5-8, but not before many have been deceived with power, signs and lying wonders, verses 9-12. Also, just as the original abomination of desolation marked the beginning of a period of unparalleled horror and misery, so will the final one begin the time of the greatest horror ever, the coming great tribulation. We can be thankful that God promises to send his Son back to earth to save mankind from self-annihilation in this coming horrible time of mass deceit and destruction. We can also thank God for the wonderful example of those who stood fast, who would not compromise with God's way, and the awesome hope of the return of Christ, of resurrection to eternal life, and of the establishment of his glorious kingdom on earth. Indeed, as world events march ever closer to the fulfillment of these prophecies, let us draw closer to God in faith, trusting him to see us through even the worst of times, knowing that we aren't left without foreknowledge to help us better understand end-time events. Daniel chapter 11, NKJV with explanation, verses 36-45. 36 Then, in New Testament times the king of the north, now the Roman emperor, as Rome took possession of Syria in 65 BC, and thus became the kingdom of the north, shall do according to his own will, he shall exalt and magnify himself above every god, establishing emperor worship, shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods, the true God, and shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished. Roman rule will in some form powerfully persist until the end-time wrath of God is complete, for what has been determined by God's pronouncement shall be done. 37. He the Roman emperor shall regard neither the God Hebrew Elohim should here be gods of his fathers, that is, the old Roman gods, nor the desire of women, indicating either being homosexual, as 14 out of the first 15 Roman emperors were, or exalting himself above Tammuz, the Babylonian Messiah for whom women wept, compare Ezekiel 8:14, who also had other names under the various mystery cults of different nations, nor regard any god, for he shall exalt himself above them all. For again, as noted on verse 36, the Roman emperors instituted emperor worship. 38a But in their place he the Roman emperor shall honor a god of fortresses or forces, KJV. The Roman emperors demanded worship of the strength of empire. Standards were idolatrous emblems of empire, emperor worship. Also, extravagant defense spending made Rome the strongest military power the world had ever seen. 38 billions, and a god the Pope, which the Roman Emperor's fathers did not know he, the Roman Emperor, beginning with Constantine the Great in AD 313 shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. 39. Thus he later Roman emperors and rulers of successor Roman kingdoms, shall act against the strongest fortresses enemy states and other religious institutions, with a foreign Babylonian god the papacy, which successive Roman rulers shall acknowledge, and advance its glory, and successive Roman rulers shall cause them the popes to rule over many, and divide the land for gain for both church and state. The previous section spanned the centuries from the beginning of Christianity in the early Roman Empire to the inception of the Catholic-dominated Holy Roman Empire system and its subsequent development up to modern times. The next verse clearly advances the time frame of the chapter to the end of this age. 40a. At the time of the end the king of the south, now probably an end-time Muslim leader, shall attack him, the king of the north, now the final end-time Roman ruler, an individual also known as the beast, Revelation 17:12-17. 40 billions. And the king of the north, the beast, shall come against him, the king of the south, probably a Muslim leader, like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships, modern war vehicles of air, land and sea. And he, the beast, shall enter the countries of the Middle East, overwhelm them, and pass through. 41. He, the beast, shall also enter the glorious land, the Holy Land, the modern state of Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these areas that follow shall escape from his hand: Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. These three territories constitute the modern country of Jordan, and the descendants of these people may be found among the Palestinians, Turks, and other Middle Eastern peoples. 42. He, the beast, shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. 43. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, also the Libyans Futhites, including the inhabitants of modern Libya, but perhaps meaning all of North and West Africa, and Ethiopians Cushites, including the people of modern Ethiopia, and probably Sudan, but perhaps meaning all of East and Southern Africa, shall follow at his heels. But news from the east and the north, of opposing nations or forces in these directions near or far, shall trouble him, the beast. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. 45a. And he, the beast, shall plant the tents of his palace between the Dead and Mediterranean seas, and should be in KJV, the glorious holy mountain Jerusalem. 45b. Yet he, the beast, shall come to his end at Christ's return, Revelation 19:20, and no one will help him. End.